Hey guys, it's Josh, and welcome back to the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad, your favorite podcast for learning how to balance between being a functional adult and a raging dumpster fire. Joining me inside the Bachelor Pad this week for what is definitely going to be one of the most exciting episodes that we've had so far this season because there's a lot of digestible, fun topics that I think will really help push all of us to the next level. And so, Bachelors, Bachelorettes, give a warm welcome to Fletcher Ellingson. Fletcher, thank you so much for making time for us today, stopping in. How's your day going?
Yeah, it's going really well, and it's just got better because I've been looking forward to this. It's always fun to talk shop with people who are enthusiastic about personal development. And I got to say, I love the whole reference to the raging dumpster fire. That always gives me a chuckle.
Anybody who's listened to the show, all my new listeners joining us today, you would undoubtedly see how much of I'm a recovering dumpster fire. That's how I like to phrase it. But I feel like that's a metaphor we can all relate to because we have all been a little messy at times.
Hey, I'm raising my hand because I can relate.
Fletcher, first, we were just talking about this a little earlier, but you're an author. So just give me the rundown. What made you first decide that, you know what, I think I have enough to say where I'm going to write a book?
Well, I gotta tell you, I never saw a book in my future, but as I began working with people and coaching people for many years, and I realized that one of the superpowers that humans have is pattern recognition. And I believe it's one of our greatest superpowers. Pattern recognition allows us to manipulate the elements, the real actual elements like hydrogen, oxygen. We're able to manipulate these things because we have been able to identify the patterns of what makes them up. And not only at that level, but patterns in relationships, patterns in how we live, patterns in speech, patterns in thinking. And so as I was going through and coaching and training people over the years, I began to notice patterns. And I wasn't looking for them. I wasn't like, oh, I want to identify these patterns. They just began to emerge after just working with so many people, right? And so I began to document stuff. And then one of my clients actually said, like, hey, Fletcher, let me know when the book comes out. They were just totally being facetious, right? Or at least I thought they were being facetious. They were like, no, we actually mean it. But I was like, I'm not going to write a book. But as I began to look back at all my notes and everything, I thought, gosh, you know what? I actually could put this into a book. I could actually document my methodology. I could share some of these stories and reach more people, and provide an opportunity for people to begin that conversation of self if they haven't already done so. And so, yeah, I said, like, I'm going to go for it. And the weird thing, Josh, is that after I wrote it, I immediately had an idea for a second book. And so I've written a second book, and this is a children's book. And I never saw a children's book in my life, and I never saw, even this book in my life. But here we are, and so I'm open to the possibility. You never know what's going to happen.
Life really is never-ending box of surprises.
Man, it totally is, right?
Yeah. And like you said, not just one book, but like I said, a second one in the works. And that's usually how inspiration strikes you. As soon as you get done with one thing, it leads you to another thought, and then you go down the rabbit hole with that. And then next thing you know, you got a series on your hand. Or at
Yeah,
least
exactly. Yeah, right. Right. And I'll tell you, it was one of the most stretching experiments that I've ever been through. It's very humbling. It's one thing to talk like you and me are just kind of like having a conversation, visiting. It's another thing to document it and be articulate with your audience in mind, right? And so it was very humbling because, my editor would send back her edits and I'm just like, oh boy, here we go. Revision number 17. And so it was very humbling, but it was a feel good experience, and definitely glad I did it.
Anything worthwhile is worth waiting for, or something like that. And a book is definitely one of those projects where you definitely don't write it in a day. But after edit number 6,422, even with the most minor tweaks, when it's done, there's this sense of fulfillment.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that you just can't trade in. It's something that you built with your own two hands that will last throughout the ages, especially in this digital age. I'm pretty sure it's like on Amazon or Kindle somewhere, so people could potentially be reading this forever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of fun to think.
Your book and your practice of the practice of feeling good. That's something that I've often said to my colleagues and some of my friends. I haven't really talked about it much on the show, but I just want to spend a little time on that. I feel like we expect people to just be these functional adults that just appear to have nowhere. You turn 18, you're a functional quote unquote adult, and we just send you out into the world. But really, and that's one of the reasons I love psychology and I got into this space, is I feel like we need to do a better job of reaching out to the younger generations, start fostering and teaching them more emotional stability and trying to raise their EQ. That way, as they're developing into these functional humans that we expect them to be.
Yeah, I think that would be such an awesome mission if we could all get behind that, right? Raising the emotional intelligence of youth. And I know our school systems they have so many challenges, and I'm not one of those people who likes to throw stones at them. They have so many challenges to deal with and so many obstacles to add to their plate. Like now you have to teach them personal development. Doesn't seem realistic to me, right? But it is something that I feel like there is a lot of room for improvement. Like, how can we as a culture cultivate personal development and emotional intelligence at a younger age? Because it makes a difference for the quality of life. At the end of the day, we all want to feel good, right? And
Yes.
so if we can help young people understand how to do that starting at an earlier age, who knows, might save on all the therapy later on in life, right?
I was like, will it put us out of a job later? Maybe. But if we can prevent one less emotional dumpster fire, then I'd say that we did our job.
Yeah, that's right.
How do you define feeling good? Because that's an abstract thought when I first heard it, is like the practice of feeling good. I mean, that's very broad. I always like to know, how did you define it? What were you thinking of when you came up with that title and just how you live your life?
So people ask to work with me because they're not feeling good in their business or their personal life, right? They're coming up against something that doesn't feel good, but it's so bothersome that they're willing to call me up, have a discovery call, and then ultimately invest in themselves, right? Most of us are practiced, and I'm raising my hand again, all right? Most of us are masterfully practiced at feeling lousy. We're practiced at feeling insecure. We're practiced at feeling jealous. We're practiced at feeling closed off, resistant. We're practiced at feeling fearful. There's so many different ways that we're practiced at feeling that don't serve us. Angry, upset, right? Worried, stressed out. Anybody out there feel worried and stressed out or upset or angry? We're masterfully practiced at that, to the point that we don't sit down in the morning and say, I think I want to feel upset or pissed off or stressed out. No, nobody chooses to feel that. Those feelings, those emotions show up without our permission, without our consent, and without our approval. They simply show up. In fact, some people, would you agree that they wake up sometimes and they're in a funk, and you go to work or you meet somebody and they're like, "Hey, what's the matter, Josh?" And you're like, "I'm just in a funk." Like, "Oh, what's the matter?" "I don't know. I just woke up in a funk. Just give me a few hours and I'll feel better." It's kind of like we're at the mercy of our emotions, and they kind of come and go again without our permission, and we kind of have to just wait for a feel good emotion, and then we're like, "Oh my gosh, I feel so good." So what if we could begin to feel good on demand? What if we could actually choose the emotional state that we wanted to have and create it on demand? That's an exciting prospect. And that's what my clients want. And so that's why during COVID, I rebranded everything to the practice of feeling good. Now, when I say good, it does not mean happy. It's fine to feel happy. It's just a term I rarely use. Do I ever feel happy? Of course I do, but it's not what I mean when I say feeling good. So what do I mean? I'll answer your question. Good is an umbrella term, and under that umbrella, there's ways of feeling such as grateful, creative, compassionate, collaborative, accepting, inclusive. How about authentic or connected and open and willing? I love feeling willing in my life. That feels really good.
And I love the fact that you have these minute distinctions that a lot of people just don't think of. And you're right, they're like, whenever they hear somebody say feel good, they automatically go happy. Happy is also another broad term for me. But feeling willing, feeling connected, those are definite adjectives that I feel like people can picture and understand the mindset to be in or that they are in. A lot of people are reactive and they are ruled by their emotions. And I feel like that wouldn't be as problematic if they had a more definite set of emotions to lead or guide them. And especially if they could control how and when they felt.
Yes, exactly. So that's at the core of the methodology is what you just hit on. What if we could understand and on demand create an emotional experience that felt good, that served us, right? That moved us forward instead of just being on autopilot all the time. In order to do that, we would have to begin to understand how the brain works. And that leads us into a fun conversation. So I've got my iPhone here, and this iPhone has an operating system, right? And Android phones have an operating system. Every device has an operating system. And that operating system, it has to get upgraded every once in a while, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. In fact, we get notifications on our phones. Hey, it's time to upgrade your operating system. On the phones as well, we have all these different applications that live within the operating system. And those applications, every single one is designed specifically to produce a very specific outcome. Every app produces a very specific outcome. So on my email app, for instance, I would be foolish to think that I can go in there and start editing a video, for instance. I can't produce that outcome because the application is programmed for something else. So we upgrade our apps, we upgrade our operating system. But let me ask you a question. When's the last time that we actually said, hey, you know what? I need to upgrade the operating system between my ears. I actually need to upgrade the programs within my head and actually identify, do these programs serve me or are they holding me back? So at the core of the practice of feeling good is really this concept of upgrading our thinking so that we can produce new and outstanding feel-good outcomes in our health, our wealth, and relationships. Because if we don't upgrade our thinking, like intentionally upgrade it, like we upgrade our phone, if we don't do that, the most we can expect is outcomes that look very similar to the ones we've been producing.
And we also talked about this before the show, is we don't want to go backwards. You know, we've been through a rough patch. We had those bugs. We're dealing with new issues now. Now, this is something that, I mean, and there might not be a definite answer, but I feel like we were talking about this. There are patterns that arise, especially within people and within groups. So out of the people you worked with, have there been certain mindsets or kind of blocks that have kept them from attaining this feel good, quote unquote, sensation?
Yeah. In my curriculum, I have these 8 different snares. They ensnare us like a trap. And these snares are really common, again, to all humans. And for instance, like there's a snare of overwhelm where people feel like they're in a state of overwhelm. And overwhelm leads to a sense of disconnection and disempowerment and a lack of powerfully making decisions, right? Or it's the blame game, right? Or I call it the fair, unfair game. Or there's the snare of comparison, which is a huge one, right? We're comparing ourselves to others, and that puts us in a place of suffering rather than feeling good. And what I want to help people do is suffer less and experience a greater sense of connection and gratitude and joy in their life. Because when we're operating from that place, we have access to progress. And that ties into what we were talking about earlier. It's going forward, right? Why do people, we all want progress. We want progress in our finances, in our health, in our relationships, in our sex, in our whatever. We always want progress. Why do we want progress? Because progress feels good.
I'm not going to say that. Some people are happy being complacent, but everybody who's listening right now, because we're not happy with complacency, progress is our goal.
Exactly.
And I just want to, because you know this, but I need everybody who's listening right now to go on down to the comments and like drop a comment if you have felt overwhelmed, stressed out, and you just didn't know how to function anymore. That's something that happens multiple times a day for some people, whether it's in their professional life, their personal life, sometimes in both. And I don't want to speak for you, but I've definitely had my fair share of clients, and it's probably happened to me myself, that sometimes when we're in this state of overwhelmness, our response isn't to take a deep breath or to process, it's to shut down.
Exactly. Because when we are overwhelmed, our powers of higher reasoning actually get shut down, like literally in our brain. We lose access to our higher reasoning functions because we are in that state. And then when you begin to look at these states and these emotions and what feels good and what doesn't feel good, what we're actually talking about is a chemical reaction. All these emotions that we're feeling, that's a chemical reaction. And so what we're actually learning how to do in my curriculum is influence the chemical reaction in the brain, which then surges through the nervous system, right? So the nervous system is delivering all those chemicals to the rest of the body. So we actually we have an emotional / chemical experience of feeling good or feeling connected or feeling eager or feeling enthusiastic. But at the end of it all, we're really talking about a handful of chemicals like adrenaline, like oxytocin, like acetylcholine, like serotonin, right? Or cortisol, right? So we're learning how to actually create and change the chemistry in the machine in which we're living. Now, it gets really interesting when we're talking at this level, because now the question is like, well, how do you affect the chemistry in the machine? The easiest and most direct answer, it comes down to the story that you're focused on, period. So I'll give you an example. You go to a movie theater, you grab your popcorn and your drink, and you sit down, and the lights go down in the theater, and then all of a sudden the movie comes on. And let's say you're at some sort of fun, action-packed movie, okay? And maybe it starts off with this incredibly intense car scene or a car chase. You know, like there's cars whizzing by, there's people shouting, there's lots of loud music, lots of loud sounds, and you're not even eating your popcorn at this moment because you are like just glued to the screen, right? There's intense action here. And if somebody could actually hook you up to a heart rate monitor, they would see that your heart has actually sped up, right? There is adrenaline and cortisol coursing through your body right now. You may not be breathing very much. You might be holding your breath. You could be on the edge of your seat, right? And then 5 or 7 minutes later, that scene ends, and you sit back into your chair. You let out a nice exhalation and take a nice breath in, and then you start enjoying your popcorn. And then pretty soon, you're laughing really hard because something funny just happened on the screen, right? And then 10 minutes later, there's something maybe romantic and you're kind of swooning. Or 10 minutes later, something jumps out at you unexpectedly and you're like, you spill your popcorn, you're like, because you jars you, right? In this 2-hour movie, you may have just had experienced more emotions than you have in an entire week. I mean, a variety of emotions, right?
Right.
And as a result, you have this incredible wild ride, but consider that what are you reacting to? You're simply reacting to light that is being shown on a screen. It's not real. It's fictitious. You know that they're actors, right? I mean, if you step back for a minute, you know, like, oh yeah, of course, those are actors. It's a fictitious story. They're calling cut. There's laughing. There's a bloopers reel somewhere, right? But the brain cannot tell the difference between what's real and what's not. And here's what the brain absolutely must do. The brain must, it has no choice. It must create an emotional / chemical experience that correlates, that's in alignment with the story that you're focused on.
And that actually tracks, because there's a linguistic principle, and the core of that principle is that whenever we engage in conversation, we take everything to be fact, because we need it to be true in order to function, in order to continue the conversation. So it only makes sense that that happens on a psychological level as well. Whatever we see, we take to be true or reality in that moment, because if we're not in reality, then what's happening?
Right. Yeah, the brain has to assume this is real because it has to produce a chemical reaction in alignment with it, because it's always looking to protect you. So if there's a sense of danger, it's gonna start pumping out cortisol and adrenaline and acetylcholine so that you are prepared for either to fight or flight or to get out of there. So if this is actually accurate, that our brain creates an emotional reaction based on what we're viewing, and that can be in the mind as well, right? Because we have these emotional experiences even while we're sleeping. Have a nightmare, you wake up with a start, right? So it doesn't matter if you're awake or asleep. Knowing that, what would happen if we simply became practiced at creating empowering stories about our life, about people in our life, about world events, about nature? What if we began to radically change our story about our experience of life? So when we are all pissed off at the world because it's not going the way we want, or whoever we wanted didn't get elected, or whatever, fill in the blank. When what we doesn't unfold the way we want it to unfold, we create a story that says, this is terrible. Right. And as a result, the mind has no choice. So it says, oh, this is terrible. Okay, well, I will create an emotional response that is in alignment with the terrible story.
You know, it's wild to me sometimes how the brain forms these connections and these processes. And it takes me back to something that my chemistry teacher said in high school, which is life is just one big chemical reaction. And it's so true. It's like everything that you see or do is just stimulation, is a chemical response affecting your brain and then causing you to react, which then perpetuates your reality and life. So it's wild that these combination of chemicals rule everything.
And exactly. And the good news is that if that is accurate, we get to have a say in how we can feel more of the time.
And that's really the goal. Humans love to be in control. We're always fighting for control. So being able to take this practice of feeling good, take more control over ourselves.
Yes.
I mean, I can understand why people are reaching out, trying to connect with you, especially during COVID. That was a time where a lot of people felt powerless, helpless. They didn't know what was coming next. And so that uncertainty, I feel like you can pair that with being overwhelmed or anxious. Once again, those chemicals are not fun chemicals.
So let's take this one step further then, because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and a lot of entrepreneurs, I've been in one all my life, and it can be a lonely ride being an entrepreneur, right? You have to bring it every single day, right?
Every day.
And so if we, as an entrepreneur, if we can influence the way we're feeling on a more regular basis, you're going to have greater access to progress, because progress usually comes from operating from a place that feels good. It feels like optimistic or enthusiastic or eager, right? Now, certainly a certain amount of fear can be helpful at times too, or pain can definitely be helpful at times. But I'm talking about most of the time, if you're operating from a feel-good place, you're going to have greater access to creativity and enthusiasm and willpower and discipline if you're feeling good. So if you're feeling fearful, if you're feeling disempowered, if you're feeling disconnected, you're not likely to take as much positive action in your life. And so a perfect example is one of my clients. She's been making about $7,000 a month, and she realized what was holding her back has been her belief system. And after she went through the curriculum, she's now earning between $40,000 and $50,000 a month. Now, is that typical? No, it's not typical. But is it possible? Absolutely. Okay. I've got tons of clients who are having these incredible outcomes in various aspects of their life. If there are entrepreneurs listening, I'm using that one because small businesses are still the heartbeat of our country. Okay. Yes, there's Apple, there's Nvidia, there's Amazon. Yes, but it's still the small businesses that are the heartbeat of this country. And so if we can tap into an empowering mindset, man, you're going to have access to growing that business or starting that business or pivoting that business or scaling that business. But we've got to really begin to pay attention to our mindset.
I mean, that's true. As a fellow entrepreneur, I can say that day in and day out, one of the first thoughts I have is, how can we be better? How are we going to take our product, our brand to the next step? How are we going to reach a larger audience? Or even on a more fundamental level, what impact am I going to have today?
Yeah.
Just those thoughts alone, they're pretty weighty. A lot of people, they don't really go around like, how am I going to change the world today? Maybe not as many people depend on them. When you're an entrepreneur, you have a whole staff. Sometimes you have a team that you have to think, what's best for them, what's best for me, how can we keep that in alignment? And sometimes it's hard to shake yourself of these habits. It takes 90 days to really form a habit. And that's one thing I've liked about reading your book so far is I feel like there are a lot of actionable steps that don't take 90 days to start or really see results from. I don't want to spoil it too much because everybody's on the road to 30 with me. I'm trying to replace my not that I have a problem with the drinking habit with a reading habit. Give the good old liver a break. It's done some work. I love how it's tangible. It's easy to digest, and you can start it right away.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I want. I want people to be able to take baby steps. I'm a big believer in being radical. Now, I define radical as a departure from the norm, a departure from what is usual. So being radical could be the babiest of baby steps. As long as as long as it is a departure from the norm, or it might be something much, much bigger, right? But get radical. If you want new outcomes in your life, you're going to have to get radical. Meaning you have to depart from what is usual. And the second thing I'm a big fan of is baby steps. Man, I look for little tiny easy wins, because I'm always looking to create evidence to support the new belief system that I want. Because in my opinion, a belief is simply a feeling of certainty, nothing more. Okay. A belief it doesn't mean a belief is accurate or inaccurate. It just means it's certain. And as you listen to conversations in the future now, you can reflect back on this conversation. When people say, well, I believe, what they're actually saying is, well, I feel certain. I feel certain that they should have done this. I feel certain about, right? I mean, anytime you hear the word belief, substitute that phrase. It's a sense of certainty. Now, the greater the sense of certainty, the greater they'll say, no, they're really going to stand on that belief, right? But then it gets really interesting. Well, what causes a sense of certainty? And what causes a sense of certainty is evidence that we've been collecting along the way. And I frequently use the example of Santa Claus. So when we were young, most of us believed in Santa Claus, right? The Santa Claus story, we believed, we felt certain that Santa Claus was real.
Right.
And why did we feel certain? Because of all the evidence, right? The presents under the tree, the milk and cookies that were eaten, the Christmas tree, the stories about Santa Claus, the books, the movies. Our parents told us that he existed. We saw him at the mall, got our picture taken with him. We had this incredible volume of evidence to support a feeling of certainty until one day somebody influential in our life suggested a new body of evidence and that body of evidence suggested that the Santa Claus guy that you've been feeling certain about actually doesn't exist. In fact, it's your parents. Now, when we first hear that, we're like, no, we're rejecting that. I've got way too much evidence. Until we begin to amass little bits of new evidence, maybe we find some presents hidden in the closet or underneath the bed, or we recognize the handwriting, or we hear a conversation that our parents are having, right? And then finally, and this is how it happens for every single one of our beliefs, finally we amass enough new evidence to support a new sense of certainty. And that new sense of certainty is so powerful that it makes it absolutely impossible to go back to the old belief. So we can do that with intention. If we identify beliefs that don't feel good, that don't serve us, we can remind ourselves, oh, just because I feel certain about this doesn't mean it's actually accurate. What do I want to believe instead? And what evidence can I find to support this new belief that I want to have? And just look for massive evidence and gather that evidence and reflect on it, consider it, remind yourself, keep it in front of you. And ultimately what will happen is you will begin to feel certain about that.
This feeling of certainty, it plays back into the operating system mentality we've been talking about this whole time. And you're right. I was like, we really do live our life. We live our lives through narratives. And whether it's Santa Claus, whether it's your parents are always right, everything we do, there was at one point a piece of evidence. Our brain saw it, heard it. It is now fact. And we keep operating under those assumptions. And I love how sometimes the most obvious things are also the most ingenious. Because if we really took the time to think about it, just sat down with ourselves, like, why did I think this? Why did I feel this way? It's because somebody introduced this thought process so long ago, but we had just forgotten about it. We just were busy just taking it in that we never thought, let me update this new belief. One of my favorite things is challenging it. Because it could be, I also love this in your book. You said, let's not think of emotions as right or wrong, or not right or, good or bad. And I think that I was like, I love that because the system that you're operating under might not be good or bad or right or wrong. It's relative. And like I said, is it still serving you? Are the thoughts, are the actions that are followed by this train of thought you have, are they making your life better? If so, then what does it really matter?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, if they're hindering us, let's think, why are they hindering us? And then what emotion, what action could be more beneficial? That's an intention piece that you were speaking to. That's the update. Like you said, it doesn't have to be a drastic change. It could be something small. I think I love about like iOS updates is they tell you what bugs they're fixing, what's going to come in. I think that's something that we need to start doing is to be like, okay, I know I need to change something. Let's make it tangible. Because when you have concepts that are too big, you get stuck sometimes, or you make too big of a change and you don't get the result you want. So when you fine tune and be like, hey, I just want to focus on these two things of I want to connect more and I need to be more disciplined when I'm in certain situations. Okay, now when I'm in a place where I'm a little upset or I don't know how to express myself, I'm not lashing out. I know I'm substituting that emotion of I'm disciplined. I'm taking my time. And that is something I had to learn because I was very impulsive. So once I replaced that impulsivity with a couple, breaths and a discipline factor, I've been more productive. So I love that. That's just something that we're trying to make commonplace.
Exactly. And if we're going to update our programming, it could be as simple as like, I notice that I'm judgmental, which I used to be very judgmental. Okay. I was a judgmental SOB, but I replaced that program with curiosity. So, right. So instead of judging, because I was really operating from fear and I had just been indoctrinated over the years with certain beliefs. So now I'm replacing that judgment with curiosity. Oh, let's get curious. What's going on for that person? Or is that actually accurate? Getting curious about ourselves, about others, let's get curious about their programming, right? I mean, instead of judging them, how about saying, Of course they're doing that. They couldn't not do that. They're acting out of their programming, right? Let's get curious about their programming. Then when we get curious, that opens up the door for compassion. And that is a game changer when we can become compassionate. And then ultimately courageous and creative. A whole bunch of C words there, right? But there's that whole process for me that I take myself through when I find myself getting judgmental or upset. I take myself through that. But curiosity is key. Curiosity begins to move the needle for me.
There are a lot of fundamental principles that I believe that we overlook in our day to day, that if we became more cognizant of, we would be living our better lives. We would be in a more consistent state of feeling good. There are about 10 chapters in your book. And I know a lot of people, for whatever reason, are apprehensive or they can't wait to get to the good part. So if you had to take your book and you had to pick one chapter right now where you were like, hey, if you don't have time to read the whole thing or you just want to get started, what would you say is probably one of the most important or best chapters that they can get into?
Yeah, good question. I'm going to give you oh gosh, that's a tough one. I'm going to give you a couple. One would be understanding a suffering mindset versus a feeling good mindset. Just getting clarity about that itself. We got to get clarity about how much time we're spending actually in a suffering mindset versus feeling good. So that would be one. The next one would be like if you're somebody who's looking to really move the needle in your health, wealth, and relationships, like you really want different outcomes, you got to read the chapter called Your Values Don't Mean Jack. Okay? Because your values don't mean jack. Your values, I don't care what they are, they will not move the needle in any area of your life. And if you think, what the hell is Fletcher talking about? Then get a copy of this book and read this chapter because it is a game changer. When you understand that your values don't mean jack, then it begs the question, well, what does move the needle? And we get into it in that chapter, but read that one. And then finally, read chapter 9, Life's Magic Wand, because this is literally how we're creating our life moment by moment. And it's a powerful concept. So you asked for one, but I gave you 3.
I'm not mad at it. I've always said good things come in what? They come in 3. Name of the show, The Not So Bad Bachelor Pad. I have to ask, what's your current status right now, Fletcher?
Happily married with a love of my life who is as big a personal development nerd as I am.
That is what I call the key to success. Because if one person's doing all the work, I don't think it's really going to last. So I love that the fact that you have a partner who you're in love with and who wants to meet you where you're at.
Yes.
And then grow from there.
That's
amazing. One of the big things that we've really tried working on in 2024, this was episode with Claude Racine. And she said, I don't want to live my life like Honda Civic. She was like, I'm a Ferrari, I'm exotic, I need to let my hair down. So that's something we've been trying to do consistently this year. What that means, and what I've taken that to mean is, what's something that you've done for yourself or that you're doing for yourself that either A, makes you feel good or is helping you progress to your next.
That's a good question. This year, 2024, I took on the theme of strength and kindness. So kindness, as a way of being, strength for physicality. Or I made the goal of becoming the strongest physically that I've ever been in my life. Not the fittest, but actually strong, like, weights, benching and all that kind of stuff. Because I'm in my mid 50s and my health or my strength is not what it used to be. My health is not what it used to be. So that's what I'm doing for myself. I joined a gym. I'd never joined a gym in my life before this. I've always been very, physical and fairly fit, but I've never joined a gym, never had lifted weights. It just wasn't something that appealed to me. But now I'm like, I have to, right? Because muscle goes away quickly when you reach my age. So that's what I'm doing. I'm building strength in the gym.
That's nice. Now, I've never asked this question before, or at least not in this manner. So I'm gonna try it out. I often tell people this, that looks don't matter because in 10 years, your partner's not going to look the same. I'm pretty sure they are a gorgeous individual. But what's something about them that has stood that test of time and that you just love about
Yeah, I like that question. That's really good. And that one's actually pretty easy for me because my wife is so calm and curious. No joke. She models that for me all the time. And that's one of the things that attracted me to her. And it was one of the things that I was like, wow, I need to really put some effort into that as well. Right. I mean, it's not that I was somebody who flew off the handle, but her level of calm and curiosity, it's off the charts. And it's something that I absolutely, and people, all our friends love that about her too. So yeah, that's something that I aspire to.
those C words? They're really beneficial. They do a
Yeah.
lot. I love that because it's the little things that people just really don't think about. Because when you ask people what do they love about their partner, and then you give them the handicap of it can't be something physical,
Hmm.
it really takes them a moment to either A, think of something, or B, they're like, I don't have anything. Because another question that I'm just going to ask you right now, which I think I know the answer to because you seem to really be in love, which is that's the goal that I'm reaching for. I want all these bachelors and bachelorettes who are listening right now. I want them to be able to retire their jersey in the rafters like you have
Yeah.
in the dating world and just enjoy retirement. Just be happy with your person.
Well, can I offer something? Because you just mentioned like you wanted the other bachelor and bachelorettes to hear this. One of the things that has helped my wife and I create an exceptional marriage, and this is our second marriage for both of us. Okay, so I'm divorced from my first marriage, and I just didn't have the tools at that time. I didn't have the tools to hold it together. Did my best, but I couldn't hold it together. But what that drove me to do, knowing I was going to get married again later on, and it also drove my wife to do too, was we actually made a list. We each came up with a list of the traits that we wanted in our partner. And we've still got it in our journals and we review it probably 3 or 4 times a year. And so we had this list of traits that we wanted in our partner, in our soulmate. Now, we did it at the very beginning while we were dating. We wrote all these down and we were just blatantly honest with each other. But that's the easy part. The hard part was then we asked ourselves the question, and we had to write these answers down too. If we want to attract that type of awesome person into our life, who do I need to be?
Wow, you did it. You did it. Not only did you create a great point, you also reminded me of what I was going to say.
Okay,
It was
great.
pretty much that. I was going to say, somebody said, would you be happy if they said the partner that you have is the partner you deserve? And that's really what we should ask ourselves is if it was anybody else, what does your partner really say about you? Or would you want your child to date that person?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
If you can't be proud and you're not really matching, what are we doing in this relationship? I think it's time to update that software right
That's
there
right. That's right.
to something more compatible because you don't see iPhones getting Android software. No, I was like, sometimes you got to do a like and like. You know?
Exactly. And so it's really important to review those lists on an ongoing basis, right? So we've been together now for 11 years. And so, I mean, just last month, we got out our journals, we literally reviewed those things. And we said, is this still accurate? Is this still accurate? Is there any room for improvement here? Are we falling down on any of these? And so it just facilitates an opportunity for a wonderful conversation. Because what we're really asking is what's working in the relationship and what's not working. And that conversation of what's working and what's not working is so beneficial. There's no blame there, right? There's just like is that area of our life still working? Is our sexual life, is it still working? Is our financial life working? Is our parenting still working? We're really asking what's the level of workability here. Is it high? Is it low? Is there room for improvement? And what's our commitment still?
I think this is something that's probably consistent throughout your life and motivated you in the book, and we talked about it in the book. But if you could go back and tell your younger self something about relationships, what do you think that would be?
If I could go back in time and tell my younger self give my younger self some relationship advice, basically? Boy, that's a good question. And I think my answer would be listen with the intent of understanding what they're saying. I think because I missed the mark on that a lot in many of my relationships.
And I feel like that ties into, like I said, just theme of curiosity that we've revisited a few times today. Sometimes when we listen or we claim that we're listening, we hear people, but we're not really listening. Because when you listen, that should just be the goal, is to understand, to be, and then you need to be curious enough when you listen to somebody to then ask, what made you think this? Or to follow that genuine line of conversation. Because I know that raising my hand, I've been guilty of this. And if you're listening and you've been guilty of it too, just go ahead and smash that like button to let me know that you're in the same boat. That I listen just to say something else. I was like, okay, you go, now I go. We play tennis with conversation. And that's not what conversation is. Sure, there's a back and forth, but we don't talk just to talk. I was like, there has to be some goal in mind. So I love the fact that if you wanted to, you need to listen to understand, to be curious.
Yes. Yes.
Alrighty. I've given you a couple minutes to think about it subconsciously, but we'll go back to it. Is there a topic that you just haven't really had a chance to delve into that you've been kind of itching to talk about?
Yeah. And it's probably a good thing that no one's asked me about it yet, because I'm really still wrestling with this.
I love this question because of that very answer. Because I think it's okay, because we're always updating our software. So I think it's okay to not know how you feel or have a feeling in this moment and then change it. Because a lot of people, they don't realize that. The narrative that I had as a kid changed when I became a teenager, as a young adult, and then when anything else in life happens. So currently, I would love to get your perspective on it. Let's hear where you're at right now.
Yeah. So what I'm really working on and exploring is this concept of radical acceptance, self-acceptance. I thought I was for a lot of years. I thought I was okay with who I was, and I am okay with who I am. And I mean, I like myself, but this past 18 months, there's been some things that as I continue to go deeper and deeper with my process of self-inquiry, I realized that I have some shame. I've got some things that I'm ashamed of that I've done in the past, said, ways of being that, that I never shared with anybody. And because I realized I'm ashamed. And then what I realized was that there were a number of things I was feeling shameful about because I'd never exposed the oxygen. And I believe our secrets continue to fester until they're exposed to oxygen. When we finally say them, share them, reveal them, they then lose a lot of their power, those secrets. And so I had been carrying these around, and I was so used to carrying them around and so used to that shame that I really didn't even see them. Yeah, they were just like camouflaged in my mind somehow. I guess what I'm saying is I'm dealing with some past shame that has gotten in the way of total self-acceptance. And that's the journey I'm on currently.
No, that's big. I love starting the day. Every day I do this, but I love starting the day with a bit of self-reflection. And most of the time, it's me facing forward, thinking of how can I be 1% better today than I was yesterday. But maybe we need to, at least me, I'm not going to talk for everybody in this instance, but maybe I need to also see, what am I ignoring? Because there's so many things, like people who have long hair. When you cut your hair, you're like, wow, I feel so much lighter. Or when you look at old clothes that don't fit you anymore and be like, dude, I lost some weight, or like whatever. There are things that we carry on us that we just, we've been with us so long that we don't feel them. We don't notice them anymore. Maybe that's the thing that's holding us back too, just as a culture that isn't connecting the way as authentically anymore, is we're so used to things weighing on us or we're just ignoring. We have these blinders on to certain things that they're actually secretly hindering our movements, kind of lagging
Hmm.
us, weighing us down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Old stories that I need to let go of. And I and I couldn't let go of them because they weren't in my awareness. And then when sometimes and some of them have come into my awareness and I'm like, ooh, that's ugly. Ooh, that's ugly. Right?
Yeah.
But
We wouldn't be former dumpster fires if we didn't have a couple of moments we were a little ashamed of, you know?
that's right. But the cool thing is, and the exciting thing is that we can, the message of shame is that you violated one of your own rules for yourself or a rule of the community at large. And so, as I've come into learning about these bits of shame that I've got, the message of guilt is that I violated a rule for myself or a rule of the community at large. Shame is that there's something wrong with me inherently. It has nothing to do with my actions. So now I get to really look at, like, why do I feel that way? What's the story that I've been telling myself? And again, getting curious, right? And the beautiful thing that's happened as a result of this, Josh, is that when I get clarity about what actually happened, and then I can create a new empowering story. And if there's something I need to go and clean up, like, no joke, I just made amends with somebody from high school. That was decades ago. And I had never spoken to them. I mean, since I treated them really badly. And when I realized that that was one of those things that was weighing down, I was feeling shameful and guilty about, I reached out on Facebook and I had an opportunity to clean it up with this guy, and he was extremely gracious. But it was like what you said, like, I felt lighter. I felt like, oh, thank goodness but I didn't have that in my awareness for so long.
No, like I said, I'm glad that you shared that, and I hope that this is a separate segment at this point that I'm going to share with the audience. But I always say that it's never too late to try to repair a bridge, no matter how bad you burnt it. But don't repair the bridge because you want people to use it. Repair the bridge because you want to fix it. And there are a lot of relationships that I lost that I wasn't able to rekindle. But like you said, I realized that, hey, I needed to clean this up. So for myself, I reached out. I tried to make amends, or I at least own my part, own up to my guilt, own up to my shame. And if they wanted to be receptive of it and build the bridge, or like say, even if we don't do it, we're not going to be best friends, maybe. Just that thank you, or you don't know how that could help somebody. So the fact that you did it for yourself, whatever comes of it, comes of it. I think that's a really big thing that more people should try. Fletcher, today has been, guys, I know you think that I just make this up or I say it all the time, but this has been one of my favorite episodes because I said this like in the first minute or two. Your energy is contagious. I was kind of in a draggy, funky mood, but you helped prime me into feeling good. But before we get out of here, I know the audience needs not only to know where can they find your book, but they need to know where can they connect with you. What do you
Yeah,
have?
you bet. Yeah, you can grab a copy of my book, The Practice of Feeling Good, on Amazon, or just go to my website, FletcherEllingson.com, or thepracticeoffeelinggood.com. Either one will take you to the same place. And you can link over to a copy of my book there. And FletcherEllingson.com, or look me up on Facebook, connect with me. I'd love to, whether you want to work with me or not, just if you're a person who's looking to evolve and spread some good vibes, some love, some kindness, connect with me, man. Let's share the wins. Let's share what's going well and join forces and be a force for good.
Alrighty, speaking of sharing, guys, do your part. Make sure you share this episode with a friend who you think could use some of the amazing gems that Fletcher's dropped today, or is also trying to put a book on their bookshelf. Because the goal every day is to be 1% better than we were yesterday. And what can make you 1% better than feeling good? You
Yeah.
know? But I will see all you amazing bachelors and bachelorettes. And heck, who knows, even now couples, anybody who is just, like I said, trying to be that 1% better next week for another episode of the Not So Bad Bachelor